Welcome to the Add Life to Yours podcast, brought to you by Dendro, where we bring the latest science-backed advice to help you live healthier. I'm your host, Karl, founder of Dendro, and today we're diving into something we all do, but rarely understand: sleep. What even is good sleep health? How does our environment impact our sleep? And how can we improve it? Stick around and you'll find out why sleep should be at the top of your priority list when it comes to your health. Joining us today as our expert guest is Dr. Jatin Joshi, a physician, professor, and expert in evidence-based medicine. On top of all this, he's also the founder and chief medical officer of Supplement Technology, as well as a scientific advisor to Dendro. More info on both our backgrounds can be found in the show notes if interested. Now, let's get into it and unpack the science behind sleep health. Without further ado, hope you enjoy the episode and most importantly, learn something from it that helps you live healthier. Now, have a pretty good understanding of, what is this thing we call sleep? Why should we care about it? And there's no shortage of reasons to care about it, as we covered. Next, it'd be awesome to cover a bit more about, what actually is good sleep health? What does it mean to sleep well? What are some of the key factors that we can keep in mind as someone trying to improve our sleep health?
Yeah, so a simple way to think about good sleep is what's called Q²C². Now, you may have heard that, or you may have heard different abbreviations for it, but essentially what you're talking about is quantity. First of all, get enough sleep. You want to have your 7 to 9 hours of sleep a day because you want enough of your slow wave sleep, you want enough of your REM sleep, you want enough time for your body to be able to recover both physically and mentally. The second Q is the quality of sleep. Sleep is not all the same. You can sleep for 7 to 9 hours, but if you're interrupted at night, you're waking up, or you're not going through all the cycles equally, that level of sleep isn't going to be as good. You'll wake up thinking, well, I've been asleep for 8-9 hours. I don't feel as good as I'm meant to, but that's because you need that quality of sleep with that. And that's where we come to what the first C is, the consistency that we've been talking about throughout this podcast. One of the best ways to train yourself so that you get this good quality and quantity of sleep is do it every day. If you say to yourself, right, I'm going to get 7 hours of sleep every single day. I'm going to go to sleep, 10:30 I'll be in bed, 11 o'clock I'll be asleep, I'm up at 6 a.m. or whatever you do, but do it every day. Do it at the weekends as well. It's tempting for us to have this time during the week when we're fairly regular. We have to go to work, or people have to go to school, or whatever. But at weekends you think, okay, that's fine. I don't have to do this. I can leave it. But what you're actually doing is that the brain is something that loves to be trained, loves routine. And if you take that routine away from it, it will struggle to get back into it. So you won't be able to get that. So the consistency part is a really important part of that sleep cycle. And I think in the CBTI, that consistency is something that they really do talk about. And the last type is, I would say, it's probably the most difficult type. It's the second C, which is trying to sleep to your chronotype. Now, we've already discussed that people can be owls, people can be larks. And if it was possible, if you were lucky enough to have a job or a study where you were able to sleep to that schedule, if you were an owl, you maybe go to bed a bit later, maybe wake up a little later. That will actually be really beneficial to your sleep habits and your sleep recovery. Unfortunately, with society, it's not always possible, but if you are able to adapt it even slightly, that's something that's really effective as well.
Now, it's a super useful framework that you laid out. I guess, to frame it a different way, sort of Q², C².
Q², C², yeah, that's good.
And yeah, definitely I've heard some other acronyms floating around there, but I think those are 4 key things to keep in mind. They're easy to remember, so maybe just to recap them. We have the quantity, so essentially your total time in bed, the quality, the time you're actually spending asleep. And I guess actually if we take the, those two together, you come up with your sleep efficiency. So you spend 10 hours in bed, but 8 asleep, 80% efficiency, and so on and so forth. Then consistency, that's just the regularity of going to bed and waking up at a similar time. And then last but not least, and as I think you rightfully pointed out, arguably the most difficult, because we to some extent have less control over it, given society and just the way things are, is having your natural chronotype fit that schedule. So, you could, I guess, have a consistent schedule, but maybe it's an early bird schedule and you're a night owl. So there's going to be that mismatch that's just not going to be optimal for you.
Who knows? Society may become more enlightened, and you can do that morningness, eveningness questionnaire, and people will say, actually, hey, look, you're an owl. Maybe you should start at 11 o'clock and work a bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely biased, already being in the night owl camp, to push for that. Hopefully, as I think sleep health rightfully starts to take up more and more attention in the sphere of broader consumer health. Yeah, hopefully one day that may be the norm.
Yeah.
Since there's a lot of strong arguments for that. Maybe actually to touch a bit more, why do you think it is that way? Why is it that we've kind of always had nutrition, we've always had exercise or physical health? I'd argue mental health now is rightfully sort of amongst the key pillars, but 5-10 years ago, that was not the case. It was a completely different landscape. And in a lot of ways, mental health sort of had this wrong stigma over it. But now it's completely different. There's and for better, there's a ton of different products and services out there around mental health. It kind of feels like sleep health, for whatever reason, it's just been pushed to the side. It's either at the bottom of people's lists or not even on their lists altogether. Why? I guess it just seems so backwards in a lot of ways, given everything we've discussed so far.
I mean, I think there's a number of reasons for that. One of them, I'd say the first part, is the understanding part of it, because when you look at exercise and nutrition, those are things that can be easily quantitatively mapped. Eat healthier, you'll be slimmer, you'll be stronger if you exercise, your heart will be healthier, and so on. So it's easily measured. Our understanding of sleep has to come from the understanding of the brain, and the brain is still that last organ where we're still exploring what it is, what it's capable of, why it does things. And I think as that understanding has progressed, then our understanding of why sleep is so important has progressed as well. But then there's also the sociological and psychological part of it. There is still, even to this day, this thing that says that, sleep is for the weak. Like you said earlier, I'll sleep when I die. I can go and work through the night. I only need a few hours. And people have thought that, there's that stigma associated with it. It's being that person that can work the hardest. Hey, look, boss, I'm here working all the time. I'm last out. I'm first in. But that you could do that, but doesn't mean you'll be the most effective person, because if your brain is not recovering, if you're physically not recovering because you're not sleeping, that won't happen. So there's that huge side of it as well. I do believe we've progressed. I think people are beginning to understand, and I think as people become more aware of why we sleep, and they understand, even by doing things themselves, getting their sleep better, and then seeing the remarkably restorative effects of that sleep, they're thinking, okay, wow, this is making the whole rest of my life better. I'm eating better, I'm exercising better, I'm cognitively better, just because I sleep better. So you're right, it has been neglected, but I'm hoping that it becomes one of those strong foundational pillars, like those other three you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of interesting things to touch on there, I think. I mean, in some ways, it goes back to the sort of cliche of work smart, not hard. I mean, ideally, you're doing a combination of both, but certainly if you sleep well, that's going to help you work smarter, be more efficient, whatever it is that you're sort of pursuing in terms of your goals. And then I guess the other thing interesting on the education, because even I think about my own experience discovering sleep health, is really by virtue of more exploring the preventative health realm. That kind of led me to it, and I became quite fascinated with the impact it can have. Curious from a more, I guess, doctor or medical perspective, is there a lot of sleep education, as you go through med school?
So unfortunately there wasn't when I was at medical school. No, that was a while ago, but being faculty at a medical school now, there's more, and our medical students have a better understanding of sleep, but it's still not as much as it should be. But then I have seen some advances and approaches in the area that I work in surgery. Our patients are constantly monitored. When they come out of an operation, they have a nurse looking at them every hour. They're not able to get sleep, and you can see it's just so physically draining on the patient. And therefore, over the last few years, processes have been put into place. We let the patient sleep. We carve out a time, even in the afternoon, a quiet time. No visitors, no phones, nothing. Even the nurses' stations, the phones are put on mute or put through to somewhere else, because the patient needs to sleep, because we understand how intricately it's linked to recovery. And I think that's one thing that people will understand or identify with the most. When you're ill, the best thing you can do is sleep to recover, because while you're sleeping, that physical and mental restorative process is occurring passively. You don't have to do anything. You're not the one who has to go out, take a pill, or go out and do some exercise. It's happening for you. You just have to give it the time to do so.
Mm-hmm. I think it's in my opinion, we're in the early innings, for sleep health. Very excited to see where it goes over the coming years, even 5-10 years from now. It'll be very interesting to see sort of how it stacks up relative to these other key pillars like our nutrition, physical health, and mental health. And, hopefully, this stigma will dissipate over time. I mean, in my own personal experience, I definitely felt that stigma. I spent some time in the corporate world, in investment banking, private equity, venture capital, before transitioning to more startups and kind of e-commerce consumer brand space. And I definitely can say I felt that firsthand. A lot of sleepless nights, or certainly nights where I would definitely not want to see the data behind my sleep, to say the least. But it was because of this sort of macho attitude, like you said, being the first one, last one out.
It seemed like a badge of honor, isn't it? Hey, look at that guy, he only slept for a few hours and stuff like that. So you're right. And it's also actually happens a lot when we're younger. When we're starting out in work, where we're trying to establish ourselves, or when we're starting a business, you've got this thing, I've got to prove it to everyone. So therefore, you're always thinking that I'm going to show everyone, I will work all the time. You need anything, I'm there, I won't sleep. But actually, we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Obviously, as we talked about, hopefully we can help people be just a little wiser when it comes to their sleep, to make that educated decision that hopefully will help them achieve their objectives, whatever they may be, while also getting a bit more sleep in the process. So now I want to shift things to what I think will arguably be one of the most interesting topics for viewers listening in, and that will be, what are the actions we can actually take to improve our sleep? And, I think it's probably a laundry list of things that we can discuss, but maybe we frame it in terms of what's related to more environmental factors, outside factors that we can adjust or do our best to control, and what's more kind of internal behaviors that we can tweak. So how about we start first with the environmental factors? Yeah. What are some of these things that can improve our sleep?
That's a great way to frame it, actually, because these are practical advice, things that people can take on and actually constitute and institute into their routine really easily. So when you're talking about the environment, we talked about previously how your bed is for sleep. You can't sleep, get up, go out and do something. But it starts on much earlier in the day. So we've talked about how when it gets dark, melatonin is released. It's telling you to go to sleep. Towards the end of the day, the adenosine sleep pressure is all building up. So what you want to do is give it the best environment for that to work. Now, that wouldn't be with fluorescent lights blazing in your thing, a stereo going off, or a TV in your bedroom with a really exciting film. You have to think about what to do. So let's talk about what you're seeing first of all. So have your lights dimmed. Have warm lights. So most LED lights these days can be classified as warm or cool lights. You want warm lights because the cool lights are more similar to daylight, and daylight is what inhibits melatonin release. So have those warm lights. have a quiet area in your bedroom itself. Get this ready before you get to sleep. But temperature is so important. So I think we've discussed before that one of the things that happens when you're going to sleep is that your core temperature drops. So the ideal temperature for your bedroom is around 19 degrees, 18, 19, something like that. That's actually pretty cool. Most people think, well, actually, that's quite chilly, but that's really important because what you want is for your core temperature to go down. Remember, in that second phase of your non-REM sleep, your temperature is going down. It's helping you get to sleep. It's instituting sleep, getting into that third stage of sleep. So you want it relatively cool. Now, in my room, I have a thermostat on the wall, so I can actually monitor what it's like. And I see it, it's so important. But then everyone knows what it's like. You know what it's like on a hot summer's day. You cannot get to sleep at all like that. So get that temperature correct. Get that lighting correct. Leave your bedroom for sleep. You want to do something. You want to watch something else. Go and watch it in another room. You want to watch TV, watch it on the TV. There used to be a time, and I'm as guilty as most, where you're watching a Netflix series, you put it on your laptop and you'll sit in bed and watch it. But you're doing yourself a disservice because that's not what your bed is for. You're identifying your bed as somewhere where you're entertained as well. So other people have processes and things that they do before they go to bed. So some people have a warm shower or a warm bath before bed. Now you'd think counterintuitively, but I thought you just said that you've got to keep your bedroom cool. But what you're doing when you have that warm shower is that your body is warm. So you get peripheral vasodilatation. So all the vessels in your hands, legs and everything, they expand out because they're trying to reduce that temperature. So that will actually help your core temperature go down. So it's something that can help you relax, something that will help the temperature go down, and then you can get to bed as well. I mean, talking about that, one of the other things that people do to help their core temperature go down is wear socks, maybe have another blanket over them. But that's something, again, to get that peripheral temperature, vasodilation, so that your core temperature drops. If you want to do that, that's fine. It's not something I could do, but that's great. So your bedroom, there's no TV going on. You haven't got the stereo blaring. Now we'll come to the thing that everyone does, no matter what you are. You could, whatever saint you are, we're all on our phone in our bed, but we've got to get out of that habit. As for a number of reasons, what phones do, and most electronic devices, they emit a form of blue light, usually in the wavelength of 460 to 480 nanometers. And what that blue light does is, because it's very similar to a wavelength of light in natural light, it inhibits melatonin. What does melatonin do? Helps you get to sleep. So if you're lying in bed there, scrolling through your phone, you're getting that blue light in, and that's stopping that melatonin production. But it isn't just that. If you're catching up on emails, you'll be thinking about what's going on. Oh, I've got to do this task. You're reading something particularly interesting, or you're going through your Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and you're cognitively engaged. And what you need to do is become cognitively relaxed. So, for example, what I do, not before, but I do now because I know better, about 60 to 90 minutes before, my phone is off. It's put away. My alarm's set on it. I just don't touch it and stuff. And my room is cool. It's dark. I try to do some stretching and stuff like that. No vigorous exercise because you don't want your body pumping away with adrenaline or anything. Get ready for bed. It's nice and cool. And I read. On a paperback. Sometimes I'll read on my Kindle, but I'll make sure that it's got the night mode engaged, because then, you've got less of that blue light coming in. And it's become part of my routine. So much so that I've got a 5-year streak on my Kindle of every single day having read it, because when I do that, my body knows this is time to go to sleep. It's part of what we talked about earlier, that consistency, that routine. So I've got this nice cool room. It's dark. There's no other sounds going on. Reading a book, you generally start to feel yourself drifting away. Pop it off and then you can go to sleep. Now that's not going to be the same for everyone. I'm sure you, Carl, may have a different way. I'm sure lots of other people have different ways. But if you stick to those main environmental things, dark, quiet, cool room, keep that light out, and have that routine, you'll find that you're sleeping so much better.
No, I think those are tons of great sleep tips in there. So I guess just to run through them quickly, when it comes to light, dim the light, but also do your best to surround yourself with warm light. Temperature, I like this interesting concept of kind of warm up to cool down, take a hot shower, put on socks, or maybe a couple extra layers, and that'll actually help you and your core body temperature drop faster. And then screen time, I think that was really interesting how you pointed out it's not just about the screen time itself, and I think that's a very interesting point because, maybe I would argue people are maybe getting a little too obsessed with this light from their phone, and if they look at it once, they're going to have a terrible night of sleep. There's all these blue light blockers out there, glasses that are getting pushed, but actually the content itself, that's really what matters.
Can't watch Die Hard just before you want to go to bed or anything.
I guess, it depends on your personal preference, but if it relaxes you or not, but certainly for most, it's not. Yeah, I guess interesting hypothetical. Is it fair to say that maybe if you're scrolling, but it's dog videos or cat videos that downregulate your nervous system and calm you down, that actually may be net positive for your sleep, even though you're getting the light?
So that I also believe, so the evidence around the light slide isn't conclusive. It's not, yes, that waveform of blue light does inhibit melatonin, but we don't know the effect it actually has on getting people to sleep. From the studies that have been, it shows a small effect, but as you said, everything is cumulative. So yes, if you're looking on something and you've got a particularly relaxing thing, or there are apps as well people use to try and help them relax, or they doing crossword, or some people even read on their phone. They use reading apps on their phone. That's fine, because that's your routine. If it's successful for you and it works for you, please go ahead, keep that consistency to that. It's just if you're doing something and it's not working for you, and you're thinking, why isn't it working for you? It could be to do with the content that you're looking at. So it's try all these different things, find the right thing for you, and then go with that.
That makes sense, and like you rightly pointed out, the wind down routine for one person, it's not necessarily going to be the playbook that works for everyone. It's a natural experimentation process and figuring out what you as an individual need to do to sort of downregulate your nervous system and calm yourself and basically put yourself in that prime state to fall asleep, stay asleep, and hopefully wake up feeling restored. Two other culprits that I have to pick your brain on would be caffeine and alcohol.
Oh, yes.
So let's maybe dive into...
And caffeine and alcohol together.
or the combination.
So caffeine gets a bad rap. Caffeine on its own is actually pretty good. Most studies around caffeine actually shows a net benefit to people. It's just how you take it. If you're going to take caffeine with tons of sugar and other stimulants, maybe it's not the best thing. But if you took caffeine in a black coffee with nothing else, do you know what? It's actually pretty good for you. But caffeine is actually what's called an adenosine receptor antagonist. We talked about adenosine before, this chemical that builds up during the day to give you that sleep pressure. Now, adenosine acts on these receptors in the brain, these neuromodulators, to down sense the brain so that it makes you feel tired. But what caffeine does is it blocks those receptors, so the adenosine can't get to them. So your brain's thinking, there's not that much adenosine around, I don't need to go to sleep. So that's why caffeine is effective in keeping you awake. But the problem that you have with caffeine is that it has what's called a half-life of around 5 to 6 hours. So what that means is that after 6 hours, that amount of caffeine you took, whether it was 20, 30, 40 milligrams in your tea, coffee, drink, whatever, half of that will be there 6 hours later. That still can be quite a substantial amount. So what you have to think is that different people react in different ways, but generally you want to take the role that you stop the caffeine so that you've got enough time for it to be cleared so your adenosine can carry on and work at its places. Because you'll have some people, I have friends that will say, I drink a coffee at 10 o'clock, I go to sleep, no problem. And they may be right. They may fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the falling asleep part. Because what helps us fall asleep? The melatonin. What builds that sleep pressure? The adenosine, which caffeine is working on. And you may fall asleep, but you'll find that your sleep is more interrupted. You're waking up at night, even though you may not remember it. And that quality of sleep is much poorer. And it may even be a case of that you've had this poor sleep, your caffeine is then wearing off morning time when it's waking up. The caffeine's then all gone, but you've got all this adenosine that couldn't get to its receptors crashing in, so you get this rebound feeling of grogginess after it. So caffeine, again, is one of those things that most people will know what they're like. Some people are really sensitive to it, and if you're that kind of person, my mum, for example, she cannot have a tea after midday. If she does, she will struggle to sleep or sleep well. Some people can go to 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. Find out what's best for you, but that's what caffeine essentially does. But you find your own way to manage it.
To moderate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, so I'm a black coffee drinker, and I think, there's no way, I have to admit, I'm an addict. There's no way I'm giving it up, and you've just given me another reason to stick with it, given that it's healthy. And is that, by the way, is that because of the antioxidants within coffee beans, or what makes coffee healthy?
Coffee is healthy because of, you're right, chemicals in it, the antioxidants, everything. But caffeine, the molecule itself, has actually got some beneficial effects on it. So yes, it is a stimulant, but the kind of stimulants it is, where it acts in moderation, actually it's pretty good. It's fine. It has loads of positive correlations associated with that. Sometimes it's difficult to wheel out whether it's the coffee that's causing the good bits, whether it's the caffeine, the tea, or whatever. But generally those drinks taken in the right amount of stuff without all the bad stuff, no problem at all. So hey, look, life is for living as well. We all want to sleep well and function well, but a nice coffee or tea is not something that we're telling people to miss out on.
Yeah, makes sense. As I get older, I start to appreciate that morning cup of coffee more and more.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about the half-life being 5 to 6 hours, I think that's a really interesting point. I guess that implies the quarter life is 10 to 12 hours.
Absolutely.
I'm someone, the reason it stood out to me is I'm someone that, I think like a lot of people after lunch, I get that dip. And so that's like one of the most tempting times for me to reach for a coffee to offset that dip. But to your point, if I'm having that afternoon coffee, whether it's 12, 1, 2, that means there's going to be roughly half or so by the time I go to bed. And, even depending on how long I sleep, I guess, a quarter could still be in my system when I wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're having a coffee at 12, you could say that if you go to sleep around 10 o'clock, you'll probably get a quarter of it still in your system. Now, everyone is different in the terms of the number of receptors they have and how sensitive they are to it and the like. So that's why there's no hard and fast rules with regards to this, but it's why we explain to people what coffee does, what caffeine does, and how you learn to manage that yourself. If you're able to do it, have your lunchtime, double espresso and still be fine, that's great. But I think a good way of approaching it is actually going more on the side of it's affecting me, and work yourself back from it. You may find yourself sleeping so well you think, I'm going to swap out that coffee for a mint tea or something like that, or a decaffeinated coffee or whatever. But work yourself back and find that right happy balance for you and go from there.
Makes sense. And I guess what you mentioned earlier, you just need to be mindful that just because you're falling asleep doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting as good quality sleep as you might be absent the caffeine, and to watch out for this rebound impact, because if you have that rebound in the morning, then it's just going to make it even more likely that you need not one coffee but 2 coffees. It's going to make that
it's a vicious cycle. You just keeps adding to it. So yeah, absolutely. But then what else you were talking about is alcohol. Now, a long time ago, well, not even that long time ago, people would have a nightcap, in the UK, a glass of sherry or something, a whiskey or something before bed to help you get to sleep. And I would have patients that say, I like to have a nice whiskey before I go to bed. It really helps me sleep. But what they're talking about is the fact that alcohol itself is a neurodepressant. So, it's a sedative in a way. So, yes, they are falling asleep, but they are not having that good quality of sleep, because there's a difference between sedation and natural sleep.
Mm-hmm.
We've discussed already how natural sleep is this wonderful thing where you've got this physical and mental restoration where you go through these amazing cycles. Your brain is at one point synchronously slow, at one point it's like it's awake, but all of these things are doing these magically restorative effects to your body. With alcohol and with other, with certain medications and neurodepressants, what you're doing is actually sedating the brain. So you're not allowing it to go through that cycle. So yes, you may fall asleep, but you're not getting the recovery effects from it. So I think most people will actually discover that for themselves when they wake up after they've had a couple of drinks. And I'm guilty as anyone there. You don't feel your best the next day. So we're not saying that, no, you can't have a glass of wine at dinner, you can't drink anything, but try to avoid it for at least the 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep, so that you've given enough time for as much alcohol to be removed from your bloodstream as possible, and then do that. And if you can get to a point where you're avoiding alcohol on most times, remember we're talking about consistency, then that will help you overall. But once in a while, if you're having it, that's fine. Just learn to understand its effects, and don't think that, I'm had a hard day at work. I just need this glass of wine at 9-10 o'clock in the evening. It'll help me sleep. Because you'll wake up the next day, you still won't feel great. And then you'll just carry on in this cycle. Learn to break that cycle and find out what's that thing that helps you sleep, helps you feel great. And you'll find that the alcohol probably isn't.
Yeah, isn't one of those things.
No.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my biggest realizations with trying out wearables, was just how much an impact alcohol can have. And I'm not talking, a ton of drinks, even just 1, 2, 3. Sometimes that would be enough to noticeably impact my sleep. So I hear what you said around sedation, and I do think that's super important to not confuse sedation with sleep. And I guess in many ways, alcohol is actually, maybe more difficult to regulate than caffeine, because it's such a social lubricant that's typically consumed at night. But I also heard that it also impacts like fragmentation. So even though we may not remember or recollect that we woke up during the night, we have these micro wake ups, which obviously impacts the sleep quality even further. And then I also heard that it blocks REM as well. Yeah. Is there merit to both those?
There is merit to that, and it's something that has been studied quite frequently, especially recently. And as we were talking about when we discuss caffeine and other things, that quality of sleep, waking up, falling asleep, fine. Maybe you're getting 7 to 9 hours, but those micro wake-ups at night, which you may not even be aware of, but it's still something that affects you, and you're not feeling those restorative effects the next day. And alcohol's effects on blocking REM sleep is something that's been widely studied, and we have to go back always to first principles. What's REM for? It's that mental restoration that we're getting. And if you're stopping that, you will not feel at your best the next day. There's something there quite not there. You're not at your utmost clarity. You're not thinking as well. Maybe you're slightly irritable. These can all be attributed to having some alcohol as well earlier on the previous day.
No, makes sense. So I think, it was a really good recap of both caffeine and alcohol, which I guess the short takeaway would be limit them as much you can, be mindful of when you consume them, but also, of course, life is to be lived, and we need to enjoy ourselves along the way. So we're by no means saying abstain from those two delights completely. All right, well, that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and most importantly, learned something along the way. Ideally, that you'll remember and be able to incorporate into your daily health routine. A big, huge shout out to Jatin, our expert guest, as well as you, the viewer, for making it all the way through, showing a real commitment to your health. Also, a quick ask from our side, whatever platform you found us on, if you could just give us a quick like, subscribe, review, feedback, you name it, we really appreciate it. Last but not least, thank you, Dendro, for sponsoring this content. Although we try and keep it as ad-free as possible, it ultimately does come with some time and monetary commitment, so thank you, Dendro, for providing that. For those unaware, Dendro is a sleep health platform that we're currently building, starting with our flagship Sleep Health Supplement Night Restore. For more info on that, check out our website, dendrohealth.com, or check out the links directly in the show notes below. Anyways, with that, hope to catch you in the next one. Don't forget to stay healthy, and let's add life to yours.